For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith here with Chris Treviño for instant analysis from USC's Tuesday morning practice of Arizona State Week. Chris, what were your general thoughts about today's practice?
You know, I'm going to talk about the weather. It's very hot this morning. It's a throwback to that heat wave. I don't like it, Jack. But they were in full pads, you know, not a ton going on. You know, I did notice that there was an upbeat mood with this team. Obviously, they're coming off a win where they pulled it out, the jaws of defeat, and they came away with a big conference gold win, as Lincoln Riley likes to call it. So you can definitely see that in the reflection as they're coming out to practice. There was a good mood. Everyone was happy. They were excited. You know, they got a game this week that they're going to be favored heavily by in Arizona State. But prep goes on. Saw some things in the scout team we're going to talk about, or the defense against the scout team. But overall, hot practice, good mood all around. The team's vibing right now.
Yeah, and it feels like every Tuesday we go heat, and then, oh yeah, Lincoln Riley talked to us today. Same thing today. We got to talk to head coach Lincoln Riley, who spoke on the offense, which surprisingly was not the best part of the USC game against Oregon State. The defense was, but he mentioned why the offense was sputtering a little bit and what needs to happen in the future. What did you think about what he said?
Right. This was a kind of a shocking thing for USC fans to see. Now, they have seen the offense look, as I like to call, mortal. Jack, you know, struggled against Stanford. There were some moments against Fresno State, but downright the offense was bleeding a little bit on Saturday against the Beavers, and Lincoln Riley kind of coughed it up, specifically about Caleb Williams. You know, it was just one of those days you don't have your best stuff. You're a baseball guy, and he mentioned pitchers. You know, sometimes they go out there and they just don't have it that night, and that's kind of what he chalked it up to with Caleb Williams. And he said, but he still brought it when they needed to. You know, that game-winning touchdown. He said, there's not 5 guys in the country who can make that throw, especially in that moment, that pressure cooker moment. So when they needed him most, he came up. But, you know, he didn't say they were going to, you know, throw it out as an outlier. There's something you still need to be cognizant of and coach up and fix and tweak and look at the film and stuff like that. So you can't just trash it all together and throw it out. You have to learn from that. And that's what they plan to do, move forward. And he said, you know, there were other things. It wasn't just Caleb going out there and not being physically at his best. There was a lot of things that went into that. It's coaches not getting them prepared. It's routes being off. It's mechanics being off. It's pass protection being off. All those things, just one of those things can make a finely tuned offense out of whack, just a tick out of whack. That's what he kind of called it. And he said there was multiple things like that going on Saturday. So that's why the offense looked as struggled as it did on Saturday. So that's something they're going to be back to hit on. He really hit on the coaching, needed to be better to get those guys prepared. So he put a lot on his shoulders and his coaching staff. Obviously, this is Lincoln Riley's baby. This is his offense, so he takes a lot of pride in that. So they're going to get back to the drawing board, coach them up right so they can, you know, come back with a better effort this weekend against Arizona State.
Yeah, he mentioned yesterday on Trojan Live the coaching needs to improve, kind of re-emphasized that today, but Bobby Haskins, when I got to talk to him, said that they've got the best coaching staff in the country. So high praise for Lincoln Riley. Speaking on Bobby Haskins, we got a little bit more news about the left tackle room, Lincoln Riley saying that Courtland Ford was ready to go for that game if need be, but it was kind of a best case scenario that if Bobby could play all the snaps, give Courtland another day to rest, then that would be good. So what did you think about the talk about Courtland and Bobby?
He said they're right on Cortland Ford was right on the edge, you know, of being fully healthy, but still being a little bit bothered by the ankle. And he said in a perfect world, you know, Bobby Haskins, the veteran left tackle guy with multiple experience at that position, would take all of the reps. And obviously that's what happened. You know, they were able to rest Cortland Ford. It was a tight spot. You know, I feel like there were some people like maybe they're going to see Cortland out there, but, you know, they kept to the game plan. Keep Haskins in unless there was an emergency. They had to turn to the initial starter, Courtland Ford, but Lincoln Riley said Ford is 100% now. The gamble paid off. You know, he's right and ready, and I'm assuming we're going to see a lot more of them together, kind of that rotation flipping back and forth this weekend against Arizona State. Maybe not too much because, as I said, USC will be a heavy favorite for Arizona State, so maybe they'll get some young guys some more playing time, and they won't burn Courtland as much. Just let him get back into it, you know, dip his toes back in before a big game against Washington State, and obviously that Utah game looming. So you want to get him back into it, as Clay Helton used to say, lathered up, so maybe they'll work him a little bit more. But good news, Courtland Ford is 100% right now, according to Lincoln Riley, and USC's offensive line getting healthier.
Yeah, I'd expect we see some sort of rotation, but heading into week 5 with Utah looming just a couple weeks down the road, you got to assume that USC probably will want to have a starter selected by the Utah game. Do you get that same feeling?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to what Lincoln Riley said, you know, that competition is going to go into the season, and they're going to pick a guy when a guy is saying, hey, I'm the guy. So I don't think they've quite seen that yet. I mean, Courtland Ford, when he was in, offense was rolling. We've seen him struggle a little bit with, him injured. So I'm interested to see what that offense looks like on Saturday when Ford gets his reps back in there, see how clean it is, how crisp it is. And, I think if it's rolling with Ford in there, I think we'll see a little bit more Ford, maybe a little less of that rotation. But that's just a theory. We'll have to see it on Saturday and see how that ankle tests out during the game.
Let's stick on the offensive line. USC fans, I think, are familiar with some pushes to get an extra yard. There's another installment of that this weekend with the Kneeland Nudge, as Brett Nealon pushed Caleb Williams forward on a big 4th and 6 as he was stopped kind of a yard prior to the line to gain. So another big play for the USC team. We heard from a lot of people about it, starting with Lincoln Riley. What did you think about his comments about the Kneeland Nudge?
Yeah, just a big smile on his face and kind of reiterated what he said in the press room following Saturday's game. Obviously he got to watch the film and see that play over and over. It went a little viral on social media. So he was definitely watching that play, and he said, it's one of the, the best plays I've ever been a part of. Like, one of the best plays he's ever kind of been a part of in his coaching career, which, says a lot. And he emphasized, like, that's what we're all about, that sort of culture, that team, that strain, that effort, everything that goes into getting the win, whether that's 1 yard or 50 yards, doesn't matter. You put that effort in every play and good things are going to happen. And we saw that play out on the field. USC needed that. And if USC doesn't get that, they lose this game probably. Let's be honest. And that's the kind of effort that they want out of their team. And that's sort of that culture, that buy-in. You can see that on the field. And that's what's happening in the locker room. So just a great display of the kind of the culture that Lincoln Riley and the staff has built and this team has formed since he's arrived.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would argue that Brett Nealon really embodies the culture they're trying to develop here. But you got to talk to Brett after practice. What did he have to say about his own big play?
Right, Brett, obviously a favorite to talk to today because we didn't get to talk to him after the game. I did see him in the hallway when we were leaving. I said, congrats on the win. But this is the first time he's ever acknowledged the Neilon Nudge. And he said, all his friends were texting him about it. Everyone was showing him the thing, and he thought it was pretty cool. But I asked him, break us down that play. And he said, it's kind of just off instinct. He's in pass pro. The guy rolled off of him, kind of looking. He sees it, and he sees Caleb, and he sees him get, stood up. And he's not quite sure where he is. He doesn't know if he already has it or he doesn't know if he's short of it. But kind of instinct just took over. Kind of goes back to what O-line coach Josh Henson has been saying is run to the ball, run to the ball, run to the ball. So that was in his head, and he just took off. And he said he made sort of eye contact with Caleb Williams. They kind of looked at each other, like Caleb was like, all right, I'm about to take this hit. And Brett was like, I think that's the hardest hit I've ever done in my career. And he just rammed into them and got them that extra, yard and a half, whatever it may be. And as I just mentioned with the culture, that's one of the biggest plays of the season and that game, and they lose without that. So just an instinctual play from a veteran, a multi-year starter, just a heads-up play. And kind of, if you watch the clip, all the kind of O-line also rally around him. So just that unity with the guys, and he was really juiced up. And he did say, because he was asked about the Bush push, obviously, and he was saying, the Bush push, that's two legends. That's obviously the better play, but we were just joking about it. But Ryan Abraham, he said on record, push, second to the Neilon Nudge.
Yeah, I definitely remember that from Tunnel Vision. Make sure you guys go check that out on YouTube. But Bobby Haskins said as well, like that's just a play they needed, a play that they are just trying to do. That's what this culture is about, is a play like the Neilon Nudge. He said they've been kind of nudging Nealon around the offices and giving him his own Neilon Nudge. So I just think it's great for this offensive line to be celebrating. And I think that SC fans should feel pretty good about the offensive line and where it stands right now, getting Courtland Ford back as well. We've seen all the other spots play pretty well. Are there any more thoughts on offense before we move to defense?
No, I mean, this is something, like Lincoln Riley said, it's not necessarily an outlier for this offense, so definitely fans are going to want to see a really good offensive performance, sort of a quote-unquote get-right game, with a injured, wounded Arizona State. This is a defense, a team where you can kind of jump on, get some confidence. Maybe this one is done by halftime. I don't know, get some backups and play. But this is a team in a week where you can get things right, get resettled, refocused, and go out there and put up some points and get that confidence, especially with two big games looming in the future. So definitely a get-right game for this team.
And we didn't get to see a lot in practice today, but one guy that stuck out, including some guy who stuck out against Oregon State, was Domani Jackson, the corner, a big star recruit from Mater Dei. We saw him working with the first-team defense for a lot against the scout team offense. What did you see from Domani in practice and the game against Oregon State?
Yeah, Domani obviously is a very popular player on this team, especially as a 5-star freshman. Got some rotation in, got his first taste of the game on Saturday in a tough environment, Jack. That's a tough environment for any freshman to go into, and especially down on the goal line where they threw them in with that special packages for the big tight end package that Oregon State was giving them. But Lincoln said, he's finally getting healthy, and that's the most important thing that he mentioned several weeks back. Got to get healthy. Well, he's healthy, and they're starting to give him, a taste of the football, get him in there. He is sort of a little bit rusty, having not played his senior year, was injured in spring, but you can see the talent, you see the instincts, and Riley was very complimentary of his play, gave him props for that one play where the tight end kind of tried to sneak out, and he had disciplined eyes. That's not a play a freshman always makes, especially in that environment, to be disciplined and keep their eyes. So got a couple tackles under his belt, and I think we're just going to see more and more of him. And he did have some big plays against the scout team offense. Now, again, it's the scout team offense, but he did have a pick, and he almost had another pick on a deep shot, going to Gary Bryant, who is, as we mentioned, on scout team, but couldn't quite bring it in over the shoulder like someone did on Saturday. We're going to talk about, but pass deflection there, but two really nice plays that he made in practice.
Yeah, for starters, that person you're talking about is Makai Blackman. To start with him, though, he just mentioned Domani Jackson came into that cornerback room. He's clearly like a dude. He's getting healthy. He made some big plays. He was also very complimentary of Sierra Wright, who also had his first interception. And it just seemed like the defensive back room, and this whole defense is gelling together because they got a lot more guys into the game as well, including Earl Barquette, who's now healthy, Bryson Shaw, who's now healthy. So it seems like Alex Finch kind of emptying the toolbox, seeing what sticks, and it was a great defensive performance for the Trojans. But speaking about Makai Blackman, we asked him what he saw on that interception that he had, which is really just a great play. It looked like a wide receiver making the catch, and he said that they were practicing something very similar heading up in the pregame process that gave him a good shot to make that interception. I asked him, have you always had hands like that? And he said, and I used to drop interceptions, so this one just kind of perfectly corralled in me. So he was very, I think, happy about the interception. I think USC fans were too.
Tips and overthrows, Jack. Tips and overthrows, that's something that we heard a lot after Saturday's win, and I'm waiting for them to come out with shirts that say tips and overthrows for a game day. But yeah, just an excellent play, and we didn't get to talk to him on Saturday. He was not chosen to speak to the media, so it was good to hear from him. And that big play, he's playing really, really well. And USC needed that sort of lockdown number one cornerback, and Makai Blackman has filled that in spades, and he's been the guy for them. And yeah, if you're a cornerback, you usually don't have the best hands, so I'm not surprised. You're as athletic and dynamic as those wide receivers, but the only difference is, Jack, you don't have the hands. So I'm sure that was a marvelous play, over the shoulder, kind of bringing it down in a clutch situation when they needed it. Max Williams was obviously the one that sealed the win for them, but that Makai Blackman one was just huge and a game-changing one. And another 4 takeaways, leading the nation, so defense playing really, really well.
Makai Blackman, the highest graded PFF cornerback on the West Coast. He's really settled down after a couple bad pass interference calls against Stanford. He continues to be a lockdown corner. Any more notes about the defense or the rest of practice today before we wrap it up?
Not really. We'll probably get into more Arizona State talk tomorrow when you talk to some of the defenders. Eric Gentry, he is likely to speak. Obviously a guy who came from Arizona State, so he's going to be a popular one to talk to. But, this is an interesting week. After a big win, you don't want to get too emotional after that, have a letdown game against Arizona State. But I don't think this coaching staff, knowing how they just narrowly escaped a loss in Oregon State, I think they're going to come focus, get everyone right, and have a really good performance this weekend. But we'll have to see. Another day of practice, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah, make sure you guys come focus tomorrow. We'll have instant analysis from tomorrow's evening practice. It should be a little bit cooler for both of us, but also make sure to go check out the YouTube channel to see highlights and interviews from today, and then we'll be back for instant analysis tomorrow. For Jack Smith, Chris Treviño, we'll check out uscfootball.com for more.